This is going to be section 5 of the Freddy 3-in-1 hobo bag. This is the assembly of your front back section to your base and side section, which is listed on page 27 to 29 of the Freddy hobo bag pattern. So what we have here is we have your set aside front and back assembly, and we have your base and side assembly as well. What we want to do is you want to flip back the wrong sides together of your front section. There's your back underneath there, so it's just laying with the wrong side down on the table. And you notice you have the marks that you have done in the prep area. So you have your center mark and you have your 2 notch marks. There's your center mark on your base, and of course your seams are what match up with your notches. So what you want to do is you want to begin by flipping your base side assembly right side together to the front section. You have your center marking on the wrong side so you see it easily. So then you line these two up, the center mark with the front back, and then you come around here and you line up your seam to that notched area. This is where the snipping of this area has come in handy, because you need to make that fold around that corner. So you find your seam, you line it up with that notch, and you clip in place. Now what you want to do is you want to continue clipping throughout this base area. So you are connecting your base to your front section. Now you may have to do a little bit of juggling here and there depending on where your seam allowance fell and how, if you took a scant ½ an inch or a little bit more, but that would be something that you'll have to do as you go along, and it wants to be nice and clean. So now once you've got that piece done, you want to go to the bottom piece and you want to do exactly the same thing. I'll move this up so you can see. So you want to connect your center portion to your center back, and I'm going to switch this around because that's the best way. I can't work backwards for you guys. So this seam right here needs to match with that notch right there. Clip that in place, and then this seam as well matches up with this notch. Make sure you got it as close as possible. Clip that in place. Now what you're going to do, get myself a couple more clips. You want to continue again along that whole section, lining up your edges of your base to the bottom of your back piece. Everything should fit perfectly. However, you may have taken a little bit more, as I said, in the seam allowance, so you may have to do a bit of adjusting here, but it should be absolutely fine. Okay, so I have just now clipped that bottom section where the seam is. I can continue up around this side, but I find that maneuvering this whole piece that's all completely clipped in place very difficult to work on my machine. So what I've done is I'm doing it in sections for you. So we begin at the base, we do both sides of the base, and then we'll do up the sides. That way it's easier to control. You don't have to worry about clips falling off, and because it will happen. So what you want to do, the way you want to sew this is you want to sew it from the base side, which is right here. You have that 3/8 of an inch drawn line right along here, and it's easier just to follow that line. So what you want to do is you want to start at your seam on the side of the base, back stitch, go all the way down 3/8 of an inch seam allowance to the other end of that seam, and you're going to back stitch. You're going to do both sides, back stitching both ways, and back stitch well, and then we're going to come back and we're going to connect one of the sides, and we'll go over how you get that curve in there perfectly. But in the meantime, we're going to go from here to here and here to here. So I'll go to the machine and I'll do that, and then I will come back. I'm back from the machine where I have attached my base piece to my front and my back exterior. Remember, I started at the seam to seam, back stitch through there, This way it will minimize all the clips that might fall off while you're clipping this whole piece. You can clip this whole piece together, but it is a little harder to work with. We're now going to bring this side piece up and begin clipping it in place. I'm going to place the bag with the foam side down to make it easier for everyone to see what I'm doing. This area right in here where the front and back attach is where you're going to be placing the side piece. This is not unlike insetting a sleeve on a top. So what we want to do is we want to take, and I'm going to flip this way, make it easier. Right at that seam point, you need to match that notch at the top of pattern piece C to that seam. And then you clip it in place. Turn the piece sideways. Find your mark on your side where your notch is and your notch on your front and or your back. Clip this in place. Swing the piece around. Same thing on the other side, the notch on the side piece and the notch on the front or the back. Clip that in place. So you can see we have begun to set this piece into that shoulder area of the front and the back. I generally will begin, I should say, down here at the bottom, makes it easier, and now we'll do that area last. I have got my front piece or my back piece looking at me, makes it easier to inset, because then you can pull away that clipped area to make it fit perfectly. Clip all the way up the side. You may need to juggle a little bit here and there, but it should fit fairly well. I'm going to go to the other side now and do the same thing. Now remember, your clips are approximately 1/2 inch from that corner to that piece, so you are clipping in at 1/2 inch, even though that your seam allowance is going to be 3/8 of an inch. Now we get to deal with this corner piece. I feel that if you have the front and back again where these snips are, it is easier to clip everything in place. This may fit a little tight, so you may end up spreading these a little bit to make everything fit perfectly. So you begin anywhere you wish, whether it be up the top seam or on the side. Use a fair amount of clips in this area because you're going to need to maneuver it through your machine, and you don't want any of the areas to pull away. So I use a fair amount of clips. Now I'll bring this to the side over here, and I'll do the same thing. Make sure your edges are exactly aligned, and if you have to spread this area, do so. That's why it's clipped. You do not want to have any puckers in this area at all. It needs to fit perfectly, just like that. Now I'm going to go to the sewing machine, and I am going to bring you with me on this one so I can show you the best way to stitch this together. So let's go to the sewing machine now. We're now over at the machine. Now I have removed my table off my cylinder machine, and that's only so that this video can be seen a lot better while that bag folds down to the side. I never use my cylinder except for when I'm doing with this bag, except for when I am doing my drop-in lining, and it never really has to be used for that either. So just so that you know, you can actually make this bag completely on a flat bed. Now I've put my needle in the down position. I am working from either the front or the back piece. As you can see, I want this piece, which is your shoulder piece, get that proper, there we go. I want this flat underneath, so you want to keep it nice and flat, and use your hand and move that piece out of the way constantly. You're going to be back stitching at the beginning, just like you did right at that spot where the seam was, where you stopped the last time. And as I sew, I pull away that top or move that top in the right position, hanging on tightly just to the next little area. Now I am doing 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I have a mark on my machine that says 3/8 of an inch. I don't use the magnetic clip because these clips are in the way when I come up to it and it shifts it. So I have this little piece of tape, masking tape with a mark on it, so it makes it easier for me to follow. Slow and steady. That's the best way to insert this. My machine is set at a very slow speed, as you can see. And I also am using a very short stitch length. The only time I ever use a longer stitch length is when I am doing top stitching. So you want to secure this well. As you're getting closer to the corner, you need to kind of pull that seam area back a bit, just to give yourself a really good grab. You'll maneuver your fingers the best way you can to make it work for you. I push this way to get everything aligned. Hanging on to this is the best way to sew it. So I push from the bottom and I push from the top to get everything lined up, because you can't get too close to the clips. As you get to that corner, you move that shoulder part away, and again you push the top and push the bottom away from the top, getting that, making sure that the edges are still aligned as you get around that corner. And remember, there's a lot of clips here and you don't want this to move around. Move that one as well. Make sure you have no puckers here. It needs to fit nice and tight. This needs patience and slow to get this perfect. We're over the hump, going on the last side down, the straight side. Make sure you're always keeping the bag out from underneath you. Don't get anything caught, especially with leather, because once you stitch through something you cannot repair it. Makes a hole, it's done. When you're getting to the corner where you've connected your base, you want to make sure it's nice and smooth. That is why you have a small stitch length. You don't want to have any kind of jerking movement squares, because that's going to show on your bag at the front. Nice and smooth, slow around this corner till you get to your spot where you began your base. Back stitch well. Pull it out, snip off your threads. I gotta find my spot here that I've just sewn for you, and this is what it will look like, just like that. Now we're going to go to the machine and we're going to hammer this out a bit to make sure it's nice and smooth. I know that I'm really close to it, so you'll see better when I get back to the table on how I've done that. Now I'm going to go back to the table and I am going to clip the other side and stitch it as well. So once we continue with this video, both sides will be done. So over to the table now. As you can see, I have inserted both the pattern piece C area, the sides, into the shoulder areas of the Freddy bag. I have also clipped back my seams to 1/4 inch. Now I have reminded you many times about back stitching on your seams, but if you feel a little bit better about securing these, you can go back and secure some of the areas of all your seams with another stitch inwards towards that cut edge all the way along here, just to secure everything so that nothing unravels. So this is what your bag looks like from the wrong side. I'm going to flip this way so you can see exactly what the shoulder looks like. Look at how neat and clean that is. There we go. Now what you want to do is you want to get a piece of, I don't know, solid. I have this beautiful steel plate that I love to hammer on. You need a poly mallet, and you need to kind of smooth out this area right in through here. So what I do is I bring this around on top of something very, very hard. You need it to be very hard. A piece of granite, for example. A piece of wood won't work because it vibrates back up. And you just gently tap all the way along that top area to smooth this whole piece out. I've done the other side as well. Now we're going to bring this bag to the right side. So you want to start by pushing on one side of the foam and pushing up and grabbing at the same time, and then pushing on the other side of foam and pushing it through. That's how you really push these bags to the right sides. We'll get this all moved around, and this is what your bag should now look like. You've got the shoulders inset into the sides just like that, nice and smooth. And because we're using leather, you can't really iron leather, so you have to hammer it to give it a nice pressing. What I will start to do with the leather only, and you can do it with the vinyl as well because it's hard, you cannot iron the vinyl from the right side. I will grab my seam just like that. I'll pinch that seam and I will begin hammering on that seam all the way along. I'll pinch it and hammer it. Don't hammer too hard because you might split your seam or just make a mark on your bag. Now remember, I've already done this top area, so I don't have to do it again. What I will do is I will hammer all the way around from just below that curved line all the way around the base, come back up to the other side, and I'll do the same on the other side as well. Now that we have this piece all ready to go, and you can see we're starting to see some shape to our Freddy bag, and these are your side straps. This is what your bag will look like. We're now going to go ahead and we're going to go to the next video on section 6, which is your interior portion, your front and back lining. So this piece will be put aside until you're ready to go ahead and insert that lining. So we'll put this aside and we'll now continue with the next video.